Chapter 18. Intense Training. Ryuga steeled himself, taking a deep breath as the wisps crowded around him much like the training orbs. His body was aching from head to toe. The sensation was that of dull, throbbing pain. He felt as if his muscles had been bruised in hundreds of spots, some more sore than others. She had a smile on her face, Ryuga remarked to himself, growing more agitated by the second. After several days of minimal progress, and now blatant torture, he was beginning to lose his patience with the entire situation. "And you just leave me!" Ryuga shouted into the night air, a statement directed towards Drake, who had now gone silent. "Fine! Fine!" Ryuga screamed even more. "I'll do it myself!" Along with the searing sensation of anger, Ryuga also felt the fire of determination. His body had begun to move on its own, despite the fatigue and injuries he had suffered at the hands of his teacher. His movements were much like a dance. He mimicked his fellow pupil Parisia and her cat-like movements. He couldn't perform them as well as she, but now he was moving on the balls of his feet, which enhanced his mobility greatly. Though the strain of his unconditioned toes was heavy, Ryuga pressed on. In the back of his mind, he knew that both Drake and Imelda had done a great deal to help him already. Perhaps on some level, he was simply disappointed in himself. His inability to look for Akira, the events that led him to this strange new world, and all of his classmates who'd lost their lives. The news that he is a dragon. All of these things combined to stress that he hadn't actually taken the time to process. Thoughts of his homeroom teacher, Miss Kanami, also flooded into his mind. His cousin and aunt, their pain at his loss. The thoughts were enough to bring tears to his eyes as he darted and danced between the creatures who attempted to drill their bodies into his. The tears began to flow even as his mind went on autopilot. Soon his body was moving around without thought, and amidst his tears and anger, he struck out, lashing the wisps with his hand as if he was bearing claws. He danced this way as if in a trance for hours, or at least what seemed like hours, as he grabbed spirit particle after spirit particle. Eventually, his torrent of emotions ran their course, and he began to feel the pull of fatigue on his body. He ran back to the hut and collapsed to his knees as soon as he'd crossed the barrier threshold, his cheeks still damp from tears. Eventually, he fell backwards and laid on his back, his mind and gaze drifting towards the sky. He lay staring up at the stars for quite some time, wondering what the future might hold. Most importantly, he wondered if he would ever return home and enjoy a normal life again. As he stared up at the night sky, 2 of the 3 moons in full bloom, he began to sincerely doubt it.
"Silly dragon,"
Parisia whispered to herself as she gazed down at Ryuga. She had been watching from a nearby tree branch secretly, as she often did at the behest of Imelda. Ryuga was so tired, exhausted both mentally and physically, that he slept out in the open that night. The remaining 2 weeks of his tutelage were devoted to mastering the ideas and principles around energy sensing and conditioning his body to evade or defend. In the mornings, he would spar with Parisia, who took great pleasure in punching him relentlessly. In the afternoons, he would train with Imelda in whatever training she felt he would benefit from the most. After a short rest, he would then battle wisps until the early hours of the morning. After just 2 short weeks, Ryuga had managed to overcome his fear, well, at least towards wisps, and also gained basic skills of survival. Though he tried his best, Ryuga only managed to collect 3,423 spirit particles during the weeks of his training. Furthermore, he still had no clue how to activate the skill he'd been gifted by Drake, Drake's scales. Still, he could tell he'd grown much stronger than before. By contrast, Parisia had already managed to complete the test for the first level of her soul sea. This allowed her to enter at will in order to deepen her bond with her alter ego, as well as speed up her development. Several days prior to the academy enrollment date, Parisia also managed to learn her ego ability, Phantom Body. She proudly showcased it to Ryuga by running circles around him during one of their sparring sessions. The skill allowed her to create after-images of herself to fool her enemies. It was purely a visual effect, but coupled with her natural agility, someone like Ryuga could barely keep up. By contrast, Ryuga's progress was painfully slow. He hadn't spoken to or seen Drake for 2 weeks now, and though he could feel his ego's presence, Ryuga got the distinct impression that Drake was waiting for something. Ryuga expressed his concerns at his slow development to his teacher, who had this to offer.
Egos and accumulating power? They can be confusing and cryptic. The reality is, your powers grow with your self-awareness and understanding. The more you learn and accept about yourself, the more you'll gain access to your soul sea.
Imelda then added,
You probably have a lot of unresolved feelings about the situation you found yourself in. I would start there. Finding peace within yourself can be a powerful strength in and of itself.
Around 3 days before the date of enrollment, Imelda called both of her students to a small lake not far from the hut. Ryuga remembered this place as the location he first met Imelda and Parisia.
Today your conditioning ends. We'll spend the next 3 days recuperating in preparation for our move to the academy. But before that, both of you will spar me so that I can assess your progress.
Huh? So I can use my new ability on you?
Parisia asked, hand beneath her chin as she tilted her head to the side.
Of course. But today's sparring will be different.
Imelda said as she began to stretch her neck and arms with a few fluid movements.
I'll be attacking you with about 10% of my strength.
Just 10%? Wait, how much have you been using so far? Ryuga's mind was racing as he'd realized he'd never even laid a hand on Imelda, much less felt as if she was holding back.
2%, maybe,
she remarked. So, 5 times stronger than normal? Is this legal? Feels like child abuse. Ryuga said dryly. Imelda just chuckled to herself before replying.
Oh, come, Ryuga. You're hardly a child. I've seen the way you stare at my chest when you think I'm not looking.
Ryuga's face turned bright red, forcing him to look down at the ground.
I never get enough of that reaction. It's okay. It's normal. Nothing to be ashamed of.
Imelda quickly added.
You're stronger than you were a few weeks ago, but still not strong enough. So I've provided 2 handicaps. The first is, I will only use 10% of my strength. I'll work up to it gradually. The second handicap is that both of you can attack me at the same time. You can use any method you think will prove effective. In order to end the fight, your team needs to hit me with a Sen attack of any type. If you are both knocked unconscious or forfeit, then I win.
Imelda was still warming up as she spoke. Ryuga said as he shot a glance over to Parisia, who seemed spaced out as usual.
Ready, set, and go!
Imelda said as she began walking towards her students. Ryuga grunted to himself as he took his ready stance, hands out in front of him, his legs positioned wide. Parisia, too, assumed her combat stance, which resembled that of a crouching animal. Ryuga had never actually worked together with Parisia during their sparring sessions. He wondered what type of strategy they could muster. Just as he was about to suggest a plan of action, Parisia darted forward, claws outstretched as she pounced on Imelda. Ryuga watched as Parisia's body was struck several times within a split second. His eyes couldn't register what happened, but his senses told him that several Sen constructs shot forward and slammed into Parisia's face, chest, and stomach in rapid-fire succession. Parisia seemed completely dazed for a split second before she righted herself and landed on her feet a few meters away from Ryuga. Parisia, wait, let's attack together! Ryuga could barely finish his statement before Parisia lunged forward again. This time, Ryuga felt a large mass of energy from above and shouted out, Parisia, wait! But it was too late. Imelda created a large square plane several meters above Parisia's head. It was at least 6 meters wide and just as tall. The square plane then eventually came down, pressing the young cat girl down to the ground, her face buried in the dirt as the force of the attack created an imprint of Parisia's body. Ryuga could do little else but watch in awe as Imelda continued to walk towards them. As his teacher drew closer to Parisia, she made a rather predictable lunge once more.
Playing dead. Well, at least you're learning,
Imelda said with a smile as she easily avoided Parisia's strikes and pushed her back once again, this time using an open palm strike to the chest. Ryuga had yet to make a move, but he could tell Parisia was slowly spiraling into a mindset of rage. After all, Who wouldn't get irate after having their face pressed into the dirt? Perry, stop! Let's come up with a plan, Ryuga said as he drew near to her, pleading for some cooperation.
Shut it, stinky human. I won't be satisfied until I claw her face at least once.
Parisia said as she wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of her mouth. Ryuga could tell the strikes weren't light, for Parisia already had bruising along her face and arms.
Where are you looking during the middle of a fight?
Imelda asked suddenly. Ryuga's eyes widened as he realized a familiar sensation, Sen traveling towards him. He was barely able to raise his aura shield, focusing it entirely upon his lower right side where he had sensed the incoming pressure. The impact was on a whole different level than what he was expecting, however, and it completely crushed his guard, taking him off of its feet and sending him crashing into an already agitated Parisia.
Weak. I'm raising weak pupils. I'm not sure I should even bring you to the academy like this.
Imelda said with a shoulder shrug, taunting both of her pupils.
Get off me!
Parisia growled, shoving Ryuga by the head to push him away. Parisia, wait, why are you getting so worked up? Ryuga had never really seen her get so agitated before. He couldn't help but wonder if there was some other issue at play. She made to charge at Imelda again, only to find herself at the mercy of several powerful hand-to-hand blows. In an instant, Imelda closed the distance and struck Parisia in her stomach. She followed the blow with an open palm uppercut to the chin, and then roundhouse kicked Parisia several feet into a nearby tree. Ryuga could only watch in disbelief as Imelda then turned to him and began her assault. The sensations Ryuga experienced during her assault were both astounding and disorienting. She used her sen as a weapon to perform phantom strikes. He could sense these, but her body moved independently of the invisible energy strikes. Ryuga was forced to use his mana to create a full-body aura shield and simultaneously guard to weather the blows. He could feel the heavy, oppressive force behind each strike. Her attack was so relentless that Ryuga could barely sense a distinction between the rapid-fire combinations. What's more, he could feel the number of sen attacks increasing. In just 5 short seconds, his mana had nearly reached its limit. Ryuga found himself being pushed back with each blow, the dull pain of heavy blows beginning to set in as his mana was nearly spent. In an effort to break the attack, he moved to throw a punch, but was easily smashed in his face twice before he could react. The impact alone was enough to dim his consciousness, and instinctively, he tried to cover up as blows rained down upon him.
Turtle, turtle. I love turtle soup.
Imelda mused whimsically as she continued her attack. Ryuga's mind was beginning to grow hazy. His mana was now at the utmost limit, and every consecutive blow caused his body to sink lower to the ground. I can't stop guarding. Shit. She's gonna keep going, and there's nothing I can do. Pathetic. She's right. I am weak. Ryuga's thoughts began to race as his mana finally gave away, and he was being hit with the first of her powerful blows. Each strike was enough to leave a stinging sensation on his skin, and gradually the pressure increased. Ryuga was sure he'd only been pinned down like this for a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. How many blows before this would end? Should he attempt to run? No. All he could do was defend. Hold on. Hold on. He kept whispering to himself as his arms grew completely numb and heavy. Not yet, Ryuga desperately told himself as he bolstered himself against the onslaught. I want to change. I can't keep going like this. I want to be stronger, damn it! He shouted amidst Imelda's raging blows.
About time, numbcake.
Drake's voice suddenly echoed in Ryuga's head.
Oh? What's this?
Imelda asked aloud, an air of surprise in her tone. She stopped her assault and took a step back as she watched a curious transformation take hold in Ryuga. His skin was beginning to grow thick and scaly. This extended to all of his skin, save for his face, neck, and chest. The scales grew in quickly, creating a gradient of blue and green tones as they shimmered in the light.
Interesting,
she remarked as Ryuga peeked through his guard, unsure why the attack ended. What the? He said as he glanced at his hands.
You tell me. It seems you finally learned to use that new spell, Ryuga.
Imelda seemed pleased. So this is Drake's scales. He took a moment to marvel at his new transformation before remembering that he was in the middle of combat.
Oh, and look, your partner's back.
Imelda glanced towards Parisia, who'd managed to rise off her feet. Parisia was clutching her abdomen. A pained and angry expression gripped her. If there was to be any chance of winning this spar, Ryuga now realized that he would have to act on Parisia's time. With his mana completely drained, it would be a few minutes before he could use Sen again. Their only chance to avoid being overwhelmed would be the next time Parisia made a move.
Oh, are you two too scared to come to me? No worries. I'll come to you,
Imelda said as she slowly walked in Parisia's direction. Crap, Ryuga whispered to himself as he motioned to dash towards Imelda to intercept her. But Imelda used Parisia as a feint to attack him instead. She lashed out, catching Ryuga in the solar plexus with a javelin-like palm thrust. The young man could feel his motion arrested, the sensation of momentum working against him as he was taken off of his feet completely. The air rushed out of his lungs as he hit the dirt with a thud.
Wow, you're conscious? That new technique must be pretty powerful,
Imelda said as she walked over towards Ryuga. He would only have one chance, and that would be when she moved in to finish things. Imelda stopped, a few steps short, just out of Ryuga's range.
I think I'll take care of the kitty first.
Ryuga was sure Imelda realized his plan. There was little doubt. Since there was nothing to lose, he got to his feet and faced his teacher head-on.
Oh, you're pretty gutsy. I'll play with you a bit then,
she said as she launched into attack once more. She used the same techniques from before. However, the sensation of pain from the strikes was completely nullified. In fact, the impact was severely dampened. Undaunted, Imelda increased her power slowly and steadily with each blow. Ryuga could gradually feel the hammering strength behind her attacks, which were now probing at him from all angles in an attempt to find holes in his defense.
Wow, the scales of a dragonoid are really something. I guess I'll just use my 10% right now,
Imelda remarked as she continued attacking Ryuga. Unlike before, his mind was clear and calm. So much so that even when the blows began to sting, Ryuga kept his cool. He looked past Imelda, who now had her back turned to Parisia. 3, 2, 1. Ryuga counted to himself before lunging at Imelda. His abandoned guard meant that he took on several direct blows before managing to grab her gi. In that instant, Parisia also struck. Her ability, Phantom Body, had long since been activated. The injured illusion of Parisia disappeared while her actual body snuck up on Imelda from a blind spot. Ryuga grasped his teacher with all of his remaining consciousness, his grip like vice as he fought to constrict her movements for even 1 second. Parisia reared back, poised to inflict a massive kick to Imelda's back when her eyes rolled upward, a key sign of having been knocked unconscious. Parisia fell forward with a thud, completely unconscious.
I'm pleased. Well done,
Imelda said with a smile, then focused on Ryuga.
You two both surprised me.
Ryuga felt a sharp, quick strike to the base of his cranium. The impact alone was enough to jar his brain, and soon he could feel the effects of Drake's scales fading as he too fell face forward into an unconscious stupor.